the one thing I just want to touch on really quick is I think the banning of the Confederate flag was amazing.
Yes, great move.
Yeah, and I mean we've talked about this off camera, and we can touch on it a little bit here. Like my stance with history. Our history is so important to everybody, especially our youth. It's important to know the history, but it's also important to understand the negativity of a lot of our history. And unfortunately, with America, a lot of the history is very negative, like we talked about the other night. We have a holiday and celebrate Christopher Columbus, who quite possibly could go toe to toe with Hitler on the fucking piece of shit list. Like Christopher Columbus was a terrible person, mass genocide. He came here and ripped this, literally single-handedly almost ripped this country from Native Americans. And we celebrate this guy. We are taught in school that this guy came here and embraced Native Americans and created Thanksgiving, and they were warmly welcomed. No, he came here and literally murdered hundreds of thousands. I may be wrong on that number, but massive amounts of Native Americans, to the point where certain tribes,
the way they're telling you the story.
Yeah, basically. Where certain tribes are legitimately extinct because of him. And we celebrate that. So it's like our history is very bloody as a country. The Confederate flag stands for a time in our history that was a terrible time.
Right.
But with that being said, and I am by no means in support of it, it is part of our history. And the only way you can grow as a culture and a nation is if you understand the history. This is something, in my personal opinion, it's something that shouldn't be flown around. You shouldn't be in support of it, but you should be knowledgeable on it. You should be aware of it and what it stood for. And the fact that it has been banned from NASCAR is a huge step forward, as long as we are not erasing the history of it. That's always, you know me, I'm somewhat of a history nerd. But I definitely think it was amazing that he led that. I think it's amazing that NASCAR followed through with it, knowing a large chunk of their fan base is from the South. It is from those rural areas that are
white South.
Yes, the rural white areas that are unfortunately, and not really to their fault, behind the times with equality. Some sections of the South are just they haven't changed. And
well, dude, I mean, before you go on from what you just said, like some things in the South haven't changed. Like, I mean, you rewind, 10, 15 minutes, what we just talked about where we're from and what we've been exposed to. And it's just like, we're all in the same country, but really where you live, it's a different place.
Oh yeah.
And the thing about it, the thing about where I'm going with that is like, we have evolved and we have changed out here in the Bay Area and on the West Coast at a rate much more, way accelerating beyond many of these other states, in between, and this is a perfect example of how you are conditioned to the environment of which you're exposed to and which you grow up in. And so a lot of those southern states, those ideals and those morals that existed so long ago, and at times where it's terrible to think, but treating people this way and segregating life and acting like this was acceptable. And a lot of that mentality just still has not changed. And I feel like it's because of the knowledge that gets passed on and what people are conditioned to think and how things are supposed to exist, that they don't change because it's always constantly sort of instilled. And that's where, in parallel with Black Lives Matter, in parallel with just progression in general, that things need to change.
Yes,
You know?
exactly. And you bring up a good point in the reality of like, as a whole, we are the United States. But every state really is so different, especially when you have states
Big
like,
country.
yeah, and especially when you have states. And I'm gonna throw out bullshit numbers, but just for example, like you have states like California has millions of people, and then you have states like Idaho that I don't even think has a million people.
Well,
Like
I mean, look how
it's
small like Rhode Island is, dude. You
yeah,
know, I mean, they're really small states. But at the same time, it's like Texas and California they're bigger than some countries.
yes,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like we also are responsible for like California is, I don't know the exact number, but it has one of the world's biggest economies. Like
Yeah,
on a you know, if you're categorizing and sort of quantifying, you know, on a global scale, the largest economy is like, just as a state, we're 1/50th of this country,
yeah,
not in size, but in name, but that's just the
yeah,
way it is. It's crazy if you want to slice, however you want to slice it. You can think about it so many different ways.
yeah, exactly.